Keith and I started going together in June of 1924. In the summer of 1927, we took a drive to Thornapple Lake. Keith parked the car on the hill above the lake near the cottages, and it was there that he gave me my beautiful diamond engagement ring. It was so lovely. Mother wrote all the invitations to our wedding by hand. We were married at my parents' home on July 17, 1929. The day before our wedding, Keith came home from somewhere near Pontiac where he was setting up a log cabin. The standard log cabin cost $550, set up and ready to live in. Just a few days before he came home, he cut his ring finger with a wood chisel. So I couldn't put his ring all the way on his finger during the wedding ceremony. I just had to slip it on part way. Keith wore a navy blue suit to be married in. My dress was called Ashes of Roses chiffon, and it was longer in the back than in the front. It was sleeveless, but it had a jacket trimmed in ecru lace. On our honeymoon, we went to see Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. Keith brought a tent and 2 cots, and I took some food supplies so we could camp out. You must remember that there weren't motels in those days. There were hotels, but we couldn't afford to stay in them. Restaurants weren't that plentiful either. When we returned, we went to our home at 1812 Ada Street in Lansing. This was the house that Keith built. Keith was working at the drop forge plant from 4 p.m. until midnight, so he would take painting or odd jobs in the daytime. He worked on a die-sinking machine at the drop forge. His clothes got so dirty and greasy, and every once in a while I would throw his shoes in the washing machine. He never wore his work shoes inside the house. Alton was born October 19, 1932. I was in labor so long that his little head was depressed. Poor little thing. He was so homely right then, but I thought he was beautiful. Of course, it wasn't long until he really was a beautiful baby. On October 24, 1935, Ronald was born. We moved out to Keith's parents' farm as his father was ill and wanted Keith there to run the farm. The farm had no indoor plumbing. We had an outdoor toilet using the Sears and Montgomery Ward catalogs for toilet paper. There was always a pail of water with a dipper on it on the kitchen cabinet, and we all used the same dipper to drink out of. In the spring of 1939, Keith built a cottage at Gun Lake. He bought a lot about 66 feet by 104 feet or so for $275. We furnished it with things that we had. When it came to an extra bed, we didn't want to spend the money for a new mattress, and so I made a tick, and we got clean, fresh straw from Keith's folks to stuff it with, and we had that for an extra bed. It wasn't that bad. On October 26, 1940, Jerry was born. He was such a cute baby. For a few years, when Alton was in his teens, we just dreaded Sunday mornings, as the first thing Alton would say was, "I'm not going to church today." Then Ronald would say, "If Alton isn't going, then I'm not going." And then little Jerry would pipe up and say that he wasn't going either. We would make them go. At the time, we didn't know if that was the right decision or not, but praise the Lord, it was. When going to the lake, the boys would all be in the back seat, and they would get to punching and quarreling, and I would talk to them and sputter until they just didn't pay any attention to what I said. When Keith had had enough, he would just reach back and really pinch their legs, and they knew he meant business. That took care of that. In 1953, Alton had his first building project, building the boathouse at Gun Lake. He was in charge of the project, but his dad helped him, and so did Ronald. Ronald mixed the cement by hand.
As you've just learned in Josepha Granger's own words, the complexity of raising a family while meeting the financial demands that accompanies doing so is pretty much the same for everyone, regardless of the lifetime in which it occurs. Their efforts to do things right has led us here tonight. This evening we celebrate more than just a remarkable family. Tonight we celebrate the tradition they started and that we are charged to continue. A tradition of excellence. From 1940 to 1959, Keith Granger and his brother Dorr owned and operated Granger Brothers in Lansing. Like all brothers, they got along well, but not without moments of terror experienced by anyone who's ever owned a business. After a successful 19-year run, in 1959 they decided to go their separate ways. Dorr continued to run Granger Brothers, and Keith, Alton, Ron, and Jerry started Keith Granger & Sons, which became Granger Construction. And while Keith and Dorr separated, corporately speaking, they initially shared the same office space located at 2702 South Cedar Street in Lansing. And as you can imagine, this led to some interesting dynamics. Al tells of the time when both firms were bidding on the same job. At the end of one bid day, Keith casually asked Al if he thought they came in under Brother Dorr. Al proceeded over to the office's communal wastebasket, unraveled a wad of paper, read it, and stated, "Yes, Dad, we were $500 under Uncle Dorr." In 1960, Keith and the boys made things legal by officially incorporating Granger Construction. And as the saying goes, the rest is showbiz history.
Dad started right out by telling us that for a deal to be right, it needed to be fair, not only for us, but also fair for our customer.
Their first three jobs were the Schmidt Shopping Center Plaza, now Colonial Village, located on Mount Hope Road just east of Boston Boulevard in Lansing, Harley Franks Elementary School in Lansing, and Dansville Elementary School. When asked about cash flow during the early days, Al modestly refers to it as being somewhat challenging due mainly to their decision, from day one, to pay all subcontractors and vendors on the 10th of each month. What was born then was the Granger tradition of treating people right, a tradition that continues to this day. It wasn't long before jobs began to flow to the new company, keeping everyone very busy. Michigan State University became a valued customer as the Granger Construction MSU partnership began in earnest in the early 60s.
Early on, when we were doing work on the MSU campus, we figured that we had one leg up because we could send a carpenter into our carpenter shop on South Cedar Street there at 2702, and they could cut footings, stakes, batterboard stakes, various things, and ship them to the job site. Well, we sent this one carpenter in, and a day later, here he has I don't know how many hundreds of stakes he had cut, banded up, ready to ship out. The only problem is he never put any points on the stake. Now, you would think we would have learned our lesson, but when we went out in that carpenter shop to increase an office for Alton, since we were running out of space, thought we'd save some money by, instead of putting the studs on the 16-inch centers, we'd go 24-inch centers. We used the same carpenter. He marked on the wrong side of his square, the 2-foot mark. So you can imagine when we went to put 4x8 sheets of paneling up, what happened. Brother Alton almost came unglued.
Once the training wheels came off the company, and Keith felt comfortable with the boys running the show, he began to relax more, willingly reducing his role to that of an advisor, yet willing to step up to the plate whenever required, a role he served in until his health prevented him from doing so. In 1966, Al, Ron, and Jerry applied a new business term, diversification, by forming Granger Container.
In the mid-1960s, we were looking a way to clean up our construction sites, primarily the work that we had on MSU campus, and specifically the Hubbard Hall, the 12-story dorm. A local hauler, who we later purchased, refused to put a container underneath the chute, thinking we'd ruin his containers. Short time after that, we purchased a used unit from Michigan State for $5,400, including a single-axle truck and several containers. That launched us into the cleanup for our own jobs that worked so well that we decided to buy a new truck and offer it to other contractors in Lansing. Several years later, we purchased a local landfill, again looking for a way to protect our hauling company. And shortly after that, we became involved in the second landfill. Now, my two brothers, I'm sure they had me set up for this, but they had kind of swapped back and forth taking care of the landfills, being the supervisors of them. And one night after work, we sat down, and they kind of pawned it off on me because they said there was nothing to it. Ron was looking after the field. He said nothing to that, and Al said nothing to the office. So 0 plus 0, I guess, was still 0, so they thought I could take care of it. So they pawned the landfills off on me. But, you know, more seriously, in those days, we never thought about what we wanted to do. It was more what needed to be done. That was the important thing.
Granger Container evolved to the point that in 1990 the three brothers determined the need to reallocate their time and business focuses. At that time, Al assumed ownership of Granger Construction, and Ron and Jerry took over as owners of the Granger Waste and Landfill businesses. It was a decision that enabled the brothers to continue rolling out their exceptional careers. Adapting to industry trends, in the early 80s, Granger Construction began offering construction management services to its established general contracting and design-build offerings. Also at that time, Al decided it was time to consider a larger headquarters, as the company and its personnel had grown significantly over the years. So the Aurelius office was built. While a great deal has changed over the years, company traditions and values have always remained in alignment with the ones clearly outlined during the company's formative years, including realizing that the greatest how-to manual ever written is called the Bible, being committed to the importance of family life, treating others as you would want to be treated, making honesty, integrity, and goodwill integral parts of every action, and focusing on quality and excellence, not just some of the time, but all of the time. Today, Granger Construction is known not only as a firm that builds structures, but a company whose name is synonymous with integrity and fairness, and giving back to the community.
Early on, Alton bid an addition for South Baptist Church. Gave them a price not to exceed. We finished the job. Alton and Jerry and I sat down. Alton said, you know, we made more dollars than I projected we would make. I suggest we give back this amount of dollars to South Baptist. I mean, talk about integrity. Wow.
And while Keith Granger and his sons set up the arena in which we all now play, their greatest contribution to each of us and to those we serve is the tradition of excellence they so clearly mapped out together in 1959. A tradition which each and every one of us must not only embrace, but share with our family members, as well as current and future fellow employees. We're confident that if Josepha Granger were to write in her journal this evening, these would be her words.
It really is amazing how far things have come since the early days of the Granger family. Much has been said this evening about the Grangers. We're most grateful for that, but remind you we are just common folks who would not have made it without the grace of God and the wonderful people who have worked so hard with us over the years, including all of you here this evening. While it may appear that our goal was to build a large company with our name on it, nothing could be further from the truth. Our overriding goal, personal and professional, was always and foremost to treat people right. Continuing this rather basic yet powerful tradition is now up to you. We are honored to have shared some of our family history with you tonight, but as I've said, this evening is not about the Grangers. It's all about you. For without the sincere dedication of all Granger employees, past and present, we wouldn't be here this evening. Our greatest honor and our greatest delight will be in watching your continued success and witnessing you sharing your traditions of excellence through actions and words with those who will so proudly follow in your footsteps.